Hey, this is Chad with BeGoneForGood, coming to you with our first installment of Adventure Bike Bites. What I would like to go through first off here is I think some of the best questions that I've ever been asked deal with why do I travel by a motorcycle? And I think in that question, there's actually two questions. One is kind of why do you travel generally? Like, why do you bother going to these places that aren't resorts or aren't Disneyland and Southern California type obvious destinations? And the second question is then why do you travel to those places on a bike? And let me answer the first question first. The reason why I travel and the reason why I think travel is so important is I agree with something Mark Twain once said about travel is the enemy of bigotry and intolerance and narrow-mindedness, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. And how important it is to travel and how it allows you to gain experience of other people and be less afraid of the things that are around you. And I liken this a little bit to the way that we all grew up and the things we learned as we aged up is that initially when you're born, all you know is your home, your own family, and the entire world outside your front door seems kind of scary. And then you eventually journey outside and you meet your friends and you learn about your neighborhood, very comfortable in that. As you get older, you get comfortable in your city and your town and maybe even your state if you've really done a lot of travel around there. But I don't understand why that progression isn't constant in our lives, and we constantly seek to make our world a little bit smaller by venturing out further and further every time. And I think that's why I travel. Is every experience that I have gives me firsthand information about the world that's out there instead of getting all the horror stories and even the great stories from people secondhand, thirdhand, and trying to build my consciousness around those stories instead of just seeing it for myself. So I travel because it makes everything in my world seem just a little bit smaller, a little bit closer, a little bit more like family. And I really like that feeling. I remember the first time that I got back from Brazil, and I'd spent about 2.5 weeks there. And all of a sudden, my neighborhood seemed really small. There was no reason why I couldn't talk to the clerk in the coffee shop because he spoke the same language. And there's no reason why the guy who bagged my items at Target wasn't a friend because we went to the same high school, even though I didn't know his name. I just knew his face. So every one of those broader experiences makes everything less than that seem much, much more familiar. And I like that feeling. And I feel like if you make travel a constant in your life and something that you're doing with diligence, you can shrink your world really, really quickly to the point where everybody in it feels like family. And I can't imagine a better place to be if we all could carry that sentiment. The second part of that question that I think is really important is why on a motorcycle? And this is the one I understand. I understand this question because I asked it myself for 20 years before I got on a motorcycle. The reason why I would say that motorcycle travel is different from obviously plane or train travel, and even more different than overlanding in a four-wheeled vehicle, is that on a motorcycle you get to experience everything. Because of the fact that there's so much more inherent danger on two wheels than four, you really have got to be paying attention. You're always engaged. You're always a participant in what's going on around you because at any moment, a turn across the front of you or a merge into you could be the last thing that you do. And so you've really got to be cognizant of everything that's going on out there, which makes you more aware of your environment, more present in your environment. All the smells that you have out there, I know this is not something that people generally talk about it, as far as an experience, but it adds a lot to the picture and the color of any environment that you're in is the smells that are associated with it. And if you are closed up in a glass box, you're not getting any of that. Likewise, inside that glass box, it's unlikely that you're getting a lot of the sounds of the environment. And on a motorcycle, even over the roar of the engine, you can still hear the the screams of the kids as you drive by and they wave at you, and you can hear all the horns and the sounds of traffic and the sounds of the city that are going on around you as you're traveling through. And all of those, I think, add a lot to the experience. I will also borrow a little bit of the sentiment of Ted Simon when it comes to the difference between motorcycle travel versus airplane or train travel, is that as you travel through the countryside mile by mile, you see the changes incrementally in the population and the architecture and the landscape. And I think that that's really, really important because it changes who you are as you travel through it as well. And you become accustomed to things. It's the same reason why you're more likely to get altitude sickness if you go from sea level to 14,000 feet than you are if you climb every foot of that 14,000 feet. You become adjusted to it, acclimatized to it. And I would say the same thing is true for travel, that if you take mile by mile, you work your way into the environment to the point where you almost become a part of it. And I think that is a paramount aspect of travel that a lot of people are missing by simply puddle jumping or hopping directly into their destination, is they're missing all the nuance of the change between North Carolina and Honduras, or the Caribbean and Washington D.C. So obviously riding to the Caribbean will be difficult, but you get my point. So those are a little bit of the reasons why I travel by motorcycle. I would be curious to hear the reasons why you travel by motorcycle. Even state to state, you can notice differences a lot better on the back of a bike than you can in a car. And I would argue that's the best reason to be on a bike and traveling that way. So let us know if you have any travel stories yourself, anything that you've experienced that has been only something exclusively that you could have experienced on the back of a bike. I'd love to hear it. If you'd like to hear more of these adventure bites, please let us know, and we will be producing them as quickly as we can for you to keep you guys engaged and going with all these questions. Thanks a lot. Ride safe.